Hey everyone, I am live at the moment. Seeing how everything works. Kind of impromptu. Got a lot of stuff going on. Yep. I'm hoping that the stream looks this good. We can check that real quick. Let's go over to YouTube. Let's check our channel. The live stream should be going. Yep. Alright, we'll see if anyone comes in. So we'll keep YouTube open too, just in case. Alright. So as you can see by the name of it, yeah, see, awesome. That's what I wanted. So as you can see by the name of it, the live stream is about anarchism. Now, in the last... Anarchism has been around for a long time. It's a very popular theme. Movie that's really... A lot of movies that really capitalize on the concept are movies like The Matrix. V for Vendetta really comes into play of it. I guess you could say that Equilibrium's more of an anti-statism, but anarchism is still kind of a theme for it. But anarchism's big. It's a big concept, especially in like libertarian circles, or any libertarian or very classically liberal ideas. And it's a really big theme right now. We have so many people who align themselves, or I guess not so many people, just so many people openly aligning themselves as anarcho-communism or anarcho-capitalism. And I wanted to kind of offer my thoughts on these, and I'll admit I'm not as well versed in these ideas as I could be. I mean, one of my symbols is an anarcho-capitalist symbol, the flag with white and black. And while I'm not completely an anarcho-capitalist, I would not be against living under anarcho-capitalism. So I guess I identify more with that. So if it seems at all skewed, I apologize. But that's how it's going to be. So if I seem to favor more of the anarcho-capitalist side, it's just how it goes. I consider myself a libertarian. I consider myself classically liberal, a constitutionalist, and I'll admit I do favor some state regulation, or not necessarily state regulation, the concept of a government regulation. I don't believe in true laissez-faire necessarily. However, I do believe that if you were to have a laissez-faire policy, I trust that policies that are bad, things that are done that are bad, I trust that media, especially journalists, would get out those bad things to the public. The public would know, and then you would have the public making their decisions based off of that. I think I'm a strong believer in the invisible hand, which makes me closer to anarcho-capitalism. I'd say I'm an anarcho-minarchist. Well, no, I'd say I'm a minarcho-capitalist is what you would say. Anarcho-minarchist doesn't make sense. A minarcho-capitalist. A capitalist minarchist. But I'm going to go over capitalism real quick. For those of you who don't know, or think that anarchism or anarchy just means just disorder or chaos, which is not necessarily a synonym of chaos. It's a political philosophy about self-governance. It's essentially no state, no official government. Now, a lot of people think that a lot of people would link people who want anarchism to... A lot of people link it to fascism, weirdly, which is stupid because anarchism is very much an antonym of fascism. Fascism is extremely... how do I put this? Fascism is extremely statist. It is almost as far as you can go. It's in the realm of totalitarianism. So when people call anarchists, whether you're whatever type of anarchist you are, a fascist, it makes no sense. And they say this a lot. And what I mean by this is a lot of people compare a lot of conservative type anarchists, libertarian type anarchists, the ones who support Trump, or anarcho-capitalists. They're calling them Nazis, and that makes no sense because these people would be anti-Nazi. Nazis would not tolerate these people in society. They would be put into concentration camps as well because they would be rebelling against the totalitarian government, the fascist government, which is an extreme use of military and police power to enforce extremely tight and harsh regulations and laws. But that's off the point. Anarchism is, it's a belief that, and it usually comes with two things. It's a belief in extreme individual rights. It's the rights of the individual are supreme over everything else, over the rights of the government, over the rights of the public, over anything else. It's that the rights of the individual are supreme, and this is something I kind of agree with, because I feel that the right of the individual is the most important and the most, I guess you could say, efficient way of securing rights for everybody. If you base rights on the individual level, it's really hard to let things like race or gender or religion dictate who's right. It's hard to have second-class citizens when your rights are on the individual level. When your rights aren't based off of if you're white or female or a Muslim or something like that. It's really hard to pin that down. So that I agree with. That's one of the many concepts of anarchism I agree with. Anarchism also is very, for the most part, at least a lot of anarchists are very optimistic about how they view people. They believe that people are, first off, they do, which I agree with this too, is they believe that people are adults, should be treated as adults, that they're capable, that they can work things out, they don't need their hands held by a nanny state. And they also believe that people are good, for the most part. And while I agree that people have good intentions, people are very selfish and are very unaware. So when delving into the more of people are good and people can figure it out is where I start to pull away more from complete anarchism. Because the issues you have with anarchism too are a lot of what ifs. And we'll get into that later. But, so, we've covered anarchism, at least a basic little discussion of it. It doesn't, there's no anarchist manifesto that I'm aware of. There's no, this is how anarchists are. I'm giving you what I've seen from reading anarchists, or self-proclaimed anarchists, I should say this. Self-proclaimed anarchist videos, debates that feature self-proclaimed anarchists, and then, blogs and tweets and other stuff. Just stuff I've seen from people who say they're anarchists and their opinions on things and their reasoning behind it. And this is what I've gathered. And to be honest, it matches up pretty well with at least the Wikipedia definition, which, we all know that's fucking amazing. There's no fault in Wikipedia. But today, we don't just see a lot of people who claim to be anarchists. We see a lot of people who claim to be ANCAP, anarcho-capitalists, and ANCOM, anarcho-communists. Now, anarcho-capitalists, and I did this in order of what I wanted to talk about, they are people who believe in the invisible hands, in a way. They believe that the state doesn't need to have any affair in the market, in the private sector. Just get the fuck out of the private sector. It's the private sector, little to no regulation, just stop. Laissez-faire, whatever. It's a belief that, again, it goes back to the invisible hand, which is something I very much agree with and very much believe in. If people know that a business or company is doing something that is bad or is not good, instead of having the government come down on them through legal action, or canceling their business license, or taxing the shit out of them, or fining the shit out of them. Instead of doing that, it's that people will take their money to someone else, and these people need to clean their act up if they want to get their money. And that's essentially just the essence of a private sector, whether it has regulation or not. But the more regulation you put in, the less power you give to the invisible hand. And that's pretty prevalent in a very corporatist era we live in now. We do live in a very corporatist era. Wish I didn't bring up corporatism. Let's change that real quick. Corporatism. Like I said, I apologize that this isn't as cleanly laid out as usually I do with this. Also, I apologize. It's been a massive dry spell. It's been like 4 or 5 months since I uploaded a video. I've been very busy. So we've gone over that. Anarcho-capitalism. Anarcho-communism is interesting because it's essentially it's the other way around. It's essentially anarcho-capitalism if everybody, like if everyone wanted to live in a commune. It's very much the belief that people will give up them. It's like they want to work in a pack. They're not going to be the individual. The belief is that people will decide, like the invisible hand would lead to people wanting to work together and to give up their assets, their individual profit and gains to benefit the whole of society or whatever. From what I understand, it's interesting. Like, it almost, though, it doesn't make sense. Because, as you probably are no doubt aware, communism in itself, like fascism, is extremely totalitarian. Like, essentially, the push of anarcho-communism is it's a belief that people, through an anarchist government, anarchist society, would be okay with giving up, donating to charity, letting people borrow each other's property, stuff like that. They would be okay with less private and more joint or communal ownership. Which, to a point, I agree, but you can get that in an anarcho-capitalist society. And communism in itself requires a state to enforce. That's the biggest issue. Communism, in order to have people be legally treated as equal, you need to have people above those who are equal to enforce the equality. When it comes to that, because communism isn't equality through individual rights, it's equality throughout. Economic equality means that people can't make more or less, people can't spend more or less, that kind of shit. Like, you have to regulate so much. So it's kind of an oxymoron. But the thing is, though, and this is something too I've ran into a lot, and this is going back with anarchism, is a lot of people in discussion with people who claim to be anarchists, they use the term statist a lot. Now, statism is kind of, I'll let you guys read. Statism is kind of the belief that, there's various forms. You can consider a minarchist, a statist, technically. Limited capitalism, which is what we kind of live in. We live in a corporatist society. That would definitely be seen as statist. But it depends on the line you draw for the word statist. Statist is an umbrella term, and it incorporates anyone who is not an anarchist. But a lot of libertarians and minarchist conservative and liberals use the word statist to describe anyone that disagrees with them. And I hate it. It's fucking annoying. Sargon of Akkad, or Akkad, however you want to pronounce it. Sargon did a video a while back responding to a lot of libertarian points. And a lot of times they threw around the word statist. And it was pretty much... It's similar to how, like, social justice warriors throw around the term Nazi if you disagree with them. Or racist, or bigot, or, insert minority phobe. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean the same as a totalitarian. And a lot of people mix that up. Now, being, as I've said, being libertarian, being a minarchist, being libertarian, you would be considered a statist. Because libertarianism is close to classical liberalism, which believes in a very limited but still existing government. Federal and then state and local as well. If you're American. And that's what I believe. I believe that the power, as you get closer and closer to the individual, the power of government or governance should increase. And as you get further and further away from the individual, the power of governance should decrease. Now, I think that things like murder and rape, those what I would consider a capital crime, could be handled at the federal level. Basic human rights, too, rights, even constitutional rights, rights that we can derive from the Constitution. Rights aren't spelled out in the Constitution, but they can be derived from them. Lined out the limits on government. That's a federal thing. The state can have some of their own laws, but even then they need to be very limited. They shouldn't be as powerful. Since we're conservatives and liberals draw the line. Liberals say federal government, conservatives say state. I go a step further, I say fuck you both. Leave it to the local governments, and then anarchists would say fuck that. The individual, no government needed. And I think local governments are better just because you still need to have a certain amount of I guess you could almost say policing. And people can police themselves, but at the same time, no, they can't. And there's nothing wrong with having people who are appointed by the public to be figures of altruism. And of course, I do agree with anarchism that the danger with enforcing morality is that morality is very subjective, and you're enforcing someone else's morality upon others and yourself. That said, things like, I say, murder, rape, theft, and especially assistance in defending your rights against other people is what you need. Because, and I guess the biggest thing with anarchism, the biggest issue I have with it, is that just like with totalitarianism, an anarchist rebellion is inevitable. An anarchy, a totalitarian takeover is inevitable. And I'll get to that later. That's going to be my main final point. But I'd like to go back to comparing, I guess, anarcho-capitalism, anarcho-communism, and then, of course, comparing, because corporatism comes in there, too. Now, the reason why I'm really against anarcho-capitalism and laissez-faire, like a true free market, is that while I believe the invisible hand can keep people in check, do this. Corporations are extremely strong, powerful companies. It's too easy for an extremely strong, powerful company. You guys get to know my friends, yeah? Yeah! To do wrong and pay off the right people. to not have their dirty secrets let out. And this is in multiple ways, and I'll go into it in a bit. With anarcho-capitalism, especially laissez-faire, you have no accountability. And while I understand that it's... Because the thing is people always look at the extremes, and it's like, well, what would you rather have? Would you rather have it to where you can make your own choices no matter what? Or someone tells you every single choice you have to make, and it's like, of course, my personal, complete free autonomy over being a robot for the state. But if I get to have a gray area, if I'm permitted a gray area, I prefer standing close to the flame of anarchism, but not quite jumping in the fire. And that's because you jump into the fire, you have no accountability. Everything will burn, you cannot control it. There's no difference. The only difference between a massively powerful corporation or business paying off media, hiring mercenaries, or hiring muscle to beat down anyone who would get in the way, and completely undercutting the competition to then gouge later once the competition has died. The only difference between that happening in the modern corporatist society that we have and anarcho-capitalism is that you have a government set up that can do something about it. A government system that checks their taxes, that checks their it keeps some of the books in order, and is would be able to investigate any of these occurrences. Now, of course, the issue is you can always pay off the government, but luckily governments are supposed to change every election. I'm not saying the system is corrupt, but you have one more, with just a little bit of statism, you have one more, as this is a minarchist target, with just a little bit of state, just a little bit of government, you have at least one more buffer. It's not always effective, but you have one more buffer between that chaos and complete abuse. Because in anarcho-capitalism, you don't have the accountability. No one has to worry about facing prison time. And you think people say, who the fuck cares now? Without the government, people would really not fucking care. Everything would be made in China. Everything would be made in places where they don't have regulations on that. And you wouldn't be able to buy anything that wasn't made in China, because if someone tried making something, they wouldn't be able to sell anything, because why would people want to pay 3 times as much, 4 times as much for something made in America that's somewhat better, but come on, I can get 5 of that for half the cost from something in China, and it'll, those 5 will last me longer than your 1, so, and 1 might last even longer, so, why? Why bother? Now, a big thing with anarcho-capitalism, too, is taxation. That's the big one. That's just the big one with anarchism in general. And the issue a lot of people have with taxation is that they don't like paying it. Now, this year, I actually have to owe this year, which is weird. I've never owed. I'm going to be owing more, too, eventually, next year. But, taxes are not fun. But if you want to have any sort of enforcement or any sort of system that can protect, that you can utilize to ensure the livelihood of your rights, the essence of your rights, then you're going to have to pay something for it. And what I mean by that, too, is there's nothing, say that you start a business and then someone wants to spread a rumor through a paid-off media source, and this is in the anarcho-capitalist world. You start a business and you start making a product that is your own. It may be similar to someone else's, but it is your own product, your own designs. You made it yourself. Another business, much larger, gets wind of it And they have their own media division. It's very popular and very widely spread and widely read, or taken seriously in your area. And they put out that you stole their idea, that you're a thief, that you're a hack, all this other stuff. But in anarcho-capitalism, well, you can't be sued, but you also can't sue them for defamation. So you have to live with that you made a product and someone was able to bully you using their own influence against you. It's a double-edged sword. They can't sue you. And granted, in the other case, in courts, them having more money, they can sue you and just drag your ass out through court to where you're not going to really have the time or money as a budding business or a budding starting off entrepreneur to really handle the time in court, let alone any costs if you were to hire a lawyer. That's, of course, an abuse as well. That said, you have a decent chance of getting pro bono lawyers, and you can also, there's ways around it. You have a better fighting chance in the court than you do in the invisible hand, because people, come on, look at the elections, look at how it is. People don't take the time to dig and research. They take everything at face value. So they're gonna hear that you did a thing. They're going to hear that you stole an idea, and they're going to believe it, and now you're out of the business. And not only that, but your name's associated to that scandal. So you try again, and you're just going to be that, So, and this is just one example, but that's an example of where it can really bite you in the ass. There's some of the bads of anarcho-capitalism. And like I said, there's a lot good with it, but you need to have a little bit of state, a little bit of government, just to hold things a little together. Not even Ben Franklin said there's only the two things certain in life are death and taxes, because government is a necessary evil. It's something we don't need to have the large mega government we have now, but a little bit of government goes a long way and is very necessary, very, very useful. But only there's anarcho-communism again. It's weird. Sorry about that. It's really weird because it has a lot. It sounds a lot like democratic socialism to me, which also is an interesting term. Because democratic socialism would technically be communism. But communism based off of the will, like a populist communism instead of a totalitarian communism, an oligarchical communism. And that's just weird. But I'm just checking something. Yep. With it though, the thing is, it's hard to have a democracy in an anarchist society. It's hard to have people. The thing is, you have to have everyone completely agree to it. And the thing is, people have power in an anarchist democracy. And eventually you end up developing a state. You develop a government. You don't develop a massive, powerful one, but you do develop governance. And I would consider that minarchism. A city or county government can still be derived as a state because, well, it isn't a state in the way of it, the state, either it be like, the state of California or the state of Israel. It is still a government. It still is a body that creates policy and manages means to enforce that policy. and to carry out various services and plans on behalf of the public. And this is, I don't see anarcho-communism working unless it's just so happens that it's a bunch of anarcho-capitalists that agree to sharing property and wealth and everything like that. Because also communism, because that's the thing, communism is essentially where everybody earns the same. No one's labor has a different value. And this is semantics, but that's how communism works. No one's labor has any more or less value than anyone else's. In communism. In communism, a fry cook is worth the same as a welder. That's the truth of it. And a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people don't. That's where socialism gets a lot of shit, because it's so close to communism. And when you raise minimum wage and stuff like that, so people don't like it, because you're essentially stating that these jobs that aren't as valuable, they're valuable, but not as valuable as other jobs. The work isn't as difficult, the art isn't as refined, the education or means to attain the skill isn't it's not as strenuous, and that's where the issue lies. Someone trading, well, I'm going to come over and weld your thing together and you make me lunch. Now, if you want to trade that, you can, but if you allow people to bargain for services, that's capitalism. Any sort of bargaining is capitalism. Even collective bargaining is an element of capitalism. A union is about as close to anarcho-communist as you get, but it's still a capitalist concept. It's workers deciding that they are willing to work together and pay a little bit extra out of their own pocket to collectively fight and to collectively negotiate and bargain for the value or the minimum value and the various other values of their work and such. So that's about as close as you get. But even then, in a capitalist society, even anarcho-capitalists, in that big mega business, workers might do that. The only thing is, in anarchism, there's nothing stopping them from firing you. Nothing stopping them from firing. There's no unemployment, there's no social security, there's no suing, there's no Better Business Bureau to report them to, there's nothing. It's just, well, you're fired. No workman's comp or anything like that. So people need to realize that. People don't understand, I think. They just like the idea of no taxes. Let's see if anyone said anything in the chat. Nope. But this kind of brings me to my last point I want to bring up, though, which is the biggest issue I have in just anarchism in general. And that is, and they would say, in anarchism, everyone's good, everyone's great, people have good intentions, and even if they don't have good intentions, the desire to not be harmed by others will keep them from harming others, to not have repercussions or consequences. However, the issue is you don't just have to deal with that. You don't just have to deal with if I shoot my neighbor, what's to stop my other neighbors from taking me out and killing me? Justice in a way that that anarchist justice will prevail. but it's not necessarily the case. An anarchist society, a society with no state government, with no government, with no state, with no governance, no law enforcement or anything, no organized means to keep the bad ones at bay, gangs will thrive. And tell me they won't? You're gonna tell me that the mafia isn't gonna own the street? They owned the street when the fucking state was there. Some of them paid off the right people, and some of them just were smooth enough to not get caught. Now you take away the potential to catch them. What's going to happen? And how are you going to fight back? You say, well, all the people will rally up. No, people are afraid. People are fearful. Fear is the biggest driver for anything. Most of the people in Nazi Germany didn't hate Jews. They just were afraid of the fucking Nazis. Same thing with communism. They didn't necessarily want communism, but the communists had the power. And they used it. A lot of North Koreans don't like Kim Jong-un or the North Korean government, but they're scared to shit of him. And through that fear comes power. And then they'll start stealing from you. Collections. Protection money. Property. Isn't this all sounding familiar? Through anarchy, you open the door for violent, tyrannical takeover, and you will get totalitarianism. I'm sorry. Even within a large group of well-meaning, well-armed, and well-organized people, you will have totalitarianism. You will have tyranny come through. Either a bigger force will kill you, or you'll rot from within and someone will take over. And while there's corruption within the state, you can at least have laws to re-elect those fuckers. You can't re-elect a gang. You can't vote out of office a gang boss. It doesn't work like that. They're not a CEO. The other gang leaders aren't the fucking board of the gang. So that's my biggest gripe with anarchism. Good examples of that in the media are like The Walking Dead. Negan, the governor, through anarchy, which that is anarchy. There's no government, just people on their own. You have various groups rise. Some are benevolent. Some are very benign. Not benign, malevolent. Most are just benign. Most just go about their day. Don't harm anyone. But if they get discovered by the malicious ones, the ones who want their shit, they will, and they will use force. And fear and selfishness are the two biggest drivers. People who are willing to satisfy their own needs to no end, and people who are afraid of others will follow a tyrannical leader. Especially if the altruistic ones get killed in the public square. Oh, excuse me, the private square. Like I said, I'm a minarchist. I believe in limiting government as much as you can. But there are certain things you need to have, especially in the modern world. Russia and China are examples of why we need to have a military. It doesn't need to be as expensive as it is now, but you still need a military. Having a court that reviews and upholds the limitations set upon government within our Constitution is important. Having a figurehead who leads the military, law enforcement, and all to help make executive decisions and to be a voice, to reach out to other nations and to us is important. Having a body of elected officials who we entrust to make decisions about the country, about the ways to approach the problems and issues and needs that we have is important. You can get all of this through Anarchy. Maybe. The biggest issue for Anarchy or more minarchical approach is corruption. The only thing is I feel is the corruption in a minarchist, in a slightly statist society, can eventually be weeded out. You have some teeth to fight it back. In an anarchist society, I feel you have very little teeth, other than the ones in your mouth. And more often than not, those are not enough. But thank you guys for joining me on this, all one of you. It has been fun. I'm glad to be back. I'll be doing more, probably once or twice a week after I get off work. I've been working at a mill. Been getting off around 2:30, getting home around 3. Eventually, I'll switch to doing them more in the morning, more in the earlier afternoon, probably like 12 or something, and keeping them short like this, under an hour. I might do a couple weekend ones as well, but I've just really enjoyed this. I miss it. I'm glad to be back with it. I'm hoping that this can become a reoccurring thing again. I'm trying to get my YouTube channels back up. It's been kind of dead for a while, and I want to make something of it, you know. So, thank you, the one of you for watching right now. Thank the rest of you for watching later, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.